The world we live in today has gone through different eras of atrocities, global conflicts, communal torment, targeted terrorist attacks and documented despicable annihilation of humans. What is however common to all of these, is that these different phases of torment have been orchestrated by men whom the world trusted with constitutional power, financial fortresses and access to sophisticated military weaponries. Till this present day, two despicable annihilations of humans headline the history of human extermination. Hitler's quest for the superior race in Germany and Mao Zedong's extermination of 45 million people in China, they provide for us a congruent evidence of man's inhumanity to man.
Why was man's inhumanity to man so terrible? Why did it ever happen? It's been going on for long.
From eating human flesh to bathing in the blood of dolphins, some of the most evil leaders in history have done some very crazy things. Idi Amin fed so many people to the crocodiles in Uganda that the bodies began to block the intake ducts at one of the country's main hydroelectrical plants. It is estimated that he may have killed 500,000 people during his reign. Joseph Stalin created an alleged conspiracy that prominent Soviet doctors were trying to murder leading government officials. It was known as the Doctors' Plot and led to the arrest and torture of multiple doctors. Ironically, all the best doctors were in jail when Stalin suffered his stroke and passed away. The Romanian dictator Nicolae Ceausescu destroyed 19 churches, 6 synagogues and 30,000 homes to build a palace for himself while the people of Romania starved. The palace is the heaviest building in the world and cost $3 billion to build. During his reign, Enver Hoxha, the dictator of Albania, banned religion, beards, typewriters and coloured TVs. The Argentinian dictator Juan Perón withheld his wife Eva Perón's cervical cancer diagnosis from her and even had surgery performed on her without her knowledge. The deceit was intended to keep the cancer secret from her and the public during his presidential campaign, as Perón believed that news of his wife's fatal illness could affect the election's outcome. Perón had an American surgeon flown into Buenos Aires to perform a hysterectomy on Eva while she was under anesthesia, believing she was having a procedure for another less important surgery. She was never told that she had cancer and never met the doctor that performed the surgery on her. In 2003, President Obiang, the dictator of Equatorial Guinea, told his citizens that he would take control of the national treasury to prevent civil servants from engaging in corruption. He then deposited more than $500 million into more than 60 accounts controlled by himself and his family.
Look at history. Not even very distant history, just more recent history. Study what happened. What happened? Are we so easily forgotten? Man's inhumanity to man. So easy to promote. So easy. Where friends suddenly become enemies. Or are we forgetting Hitler's plan for his Aryan race, the perfect race?
Some historians believe that Adolf Hitler thought that his mission in life was to rid the world of Jews. That even if he didn't build the Third Reich for 1,000 years, he would be celebrating for eliminating the Jewish population from the world. I don't know how you begin to deal with that kind of madness, but that's who he was.
Maybe you need to know what led Hitler to become the butcher that he became. If you want to know what led Hitler to become the evil man that he became, you'd be amazed that Hitler didn't just start out like that. No. He had an ideology that was based on the teachings and doctrines of certain other people.
He was the man who was giving voice to a long history of German pride. The consequences of World War I for Germany were extraordinary. I mean, the victors, the Western Alliance, placed such penalties on them that they could barely survive. And so they were open to the idea of someone like Hitler who could give voice to their most base fears, and he very cannily knew just how to do that.
Hitler, very quickly after the World War I, began to engage in political activity, joining and helping start the German Workers' Party in 1919.
This party later became the Nazi Party.
The atrocities committed by the Nazis at the height of their power are staples of every lesson on World War II. But just how did a democracy like Germany fall under the sway of a tyrant in the first place? It all goes back to Germany's loss to the Allies in World War I. German leaders were forced to sign the Treaty of Versailles, agreeing to shrink its armed forces, give up land, and pay large sums of money in reparations, weakening its already unstable economy. Many Germans felt humiliated and betrayed by their leadership, and there was growing fear that their nation would be stuck in poverty and decline. In this climate of bitterness, Hitler rose to prominence. A gifted public speaker, he captured the people's disillusionment with a series of speeches calling for a stronger, unified Germany. He insisted that one group was to blame for the nation's post-war misfortunes: the Jews. Hitler and his followers attempted a government coup in 1923, but the plan failed. Hitler was jailed for treason for 9 months, but the publicity from the failed coup made him more popular than ever. Then, in 1929, the Great Depression hit, destroying the German economy overnight and leaving millions unemployed. Hitler saw the ensuing chaos as his opportunity to seize power. He loudly criticized the ruling government and promised to return Germany to greatness. Long-suffering Germans believed they had finally found their savior. In Germany's 1932 elections, the Nazis won a majority of seats in parliament, and Hitler ran for president. Though he lost, his soaring popularity inspired President Paul von Hindenburg to appoint him chancellor, the head of the German government. As chancellor, Hitler wasted no time tightening his grip on every aspect of German life. He tripled the size of the military, violating the Treaty of Versailles. Under Hitler's orders, rival parties were banned, while paramilitary groups cracked down on protests and executed political opponents. Anti-Semitic laws prohibited Jews from working, voting, and occupying public spaces. A propaganda department produced art, films, and books praising Hitler and embracing his vision of a better Germany. After the death of President von Hindenburg in 1934, Hitler declared himself Führer, an absolute dictator. With Germany under his total control, Hitler would shift his focus to global domination, setting the stage for World War II.
Shortly after that, less than a decade after that, probably a decade after that, you had Mao Zedong of China, responsible for the killing or the death of 45 million people plus.
Who was the biggest mass murderer in the history of the world? Most people probably assume that the answer is Adolf Hitler, architect of the Holocaust. Others might guess Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, who may indeed have managed to kill even more innocent people than Hitler did, many of them as part of a terror famine that likely took more lives than the Holocaust. But both Hitler and Stalin were outdone by Mao Zedong. From 1958 to 1962, his Great Leap Forward policy led to the deaths of up to 45 million people, easily making it the biggest episode of mass murder ever recorded. Mao thought that he could catapult his country past its competitors by herding villagers across the country into giant people's communes. In pursuit of a utopian paradise, everything was collectivized. People had their work, homes, land, belongings, and livelihoods taken from them. In collective canteens, food, distributed by the spoonful according to merit, became a weapon used to force people to follow the party's every dictate. As incentives to work were removed, coercion and violence were used instead to compel famished farmers to perform labor on poorly planned irrigation projects, while fields were neglected. A catastrophe of gargantuan proportions ensued. Extrapolating from published population statistics, historians have speculated that tens of millions of people died of starvation. But the true dimensions of what happened are only now coming to light, thanks to the meticulous reports the party itself compiled during the famine. What comes out of this massive and detailed dossier is a tale of horror in which Mao emerges as one of the greatest mass murderers in history, responsible for the deaths of at least 45 million people between 1958 and 1962. It is not merely the extent of the catastrophe that dwarfs earlier estimates, but also the manner in which many people died. Between 2 and 3 million victims were tortured to death or summarily killed, often for the slightest infraction. When a boy stole a handful of grain in a Hunan village, local boss Xiong Dechang forced his father to bury him alive. The father died of grief a few days later. The case of Wang Ziyu was reported to the central leadership. One of his ears was chopped off, his legs were tied with iron wire, a 10-kilogram stone was dropped on his back, and then he was branded with a sizzling tool punishment for digging up a potato.
For many years the world has seen an avalanche of injustice meted by dictatorial heads of states. They began as persons with genuine interest for the public good, but as time elapsed, they evolved to become the masterminds of the most devastating extermination of humans in staggering proportions. So, man's inhumanity to man has evolved through different phases of human existence, but what remains constant is that these evils epitomize how good men can be transmuted into extreme masterminds of wickedness. Essentially, man's inhumanity to man emanates from a heart that is yet to be purged from inherent hatred and wickedness described for us in Jeremiah 17 verse 9, which says the heart is deceitful above all things, and desperately wicked. Who can know it?
Remember, the Bible tells us because of the wickedness of man, God destroyed the world with water in the days of Noah. He destroyed the world. He declared that it repented him that he made man. He was fed up with the wickedness of man. It wasn't man's wickedness toward God that he was talking about. It was man's wickedness to man. Man's inhumanity to man. That's what God was looking at. The way man treated other men.
So, like the wickedness witnessed during the days of Hitler, Saddam, and others alike, the progenies of similar lineage sought to plunge the world into another era of human annihilation in 2020, albeit through the facade of a man-made virus called COVID.
I mean, think about it. The same sponsors of eugenics and racial hygiene of the past, same sponsors of the past, are still sponsoring vaccines today. How can the vision be different? How can the results be different? That was what was planned with COVID.
It's a repeat of history and different technology in that, again, people are being demonized, those who don't obey. The thing about it, though, is more and more people are beginning to not obey. Less and less are taking the jab because the body count, the people who are harmed, who die, who get heart attacks. I mean, when children get heart attacks, you have to say to yourself, what's going on? This is not normal. This is not, and the weapons that have been used right from the get-go, from 2019, March and April, was fear. Fear and constant propaganda to keep people in line with whatever the government and public health officials who were working together hand in glove were telling them.
The organizations that supported the lawlessness in those days have not gone extinct.
The organizations that supported these acts of lawlessness on which Hitler wrote to destroy, exterminate millions of people with the plan for more. They're still there. They have not changed.
More than 1,600 of the top Nazi architects of the genocide, engineers, scientists, and medical doctors were smuggled into the United States against the explicit directive of the president at that time, Truman, who said that he did not allow anyone who was a member of the Nazi Party to enter this country. And yet they were smuggled in by government officials. And they were scattered all over the country in medical institutions and scientific institutions. And they taught a whole generation of American scientists how to do things the Nazi way. The first thing that came out of it were the CIA mind control experiments, which were all directed by the Nazis. And the other part is that the medical establishment is just as involved as it was under the Nazis. That's the real horror of it.
So that should make you think they have not changed. We're talking about man's inhumanity to man. So sometimes the victim is a person of color. Sometimes it's not a person of color. It's just a teacher mistreating a student. A government official mistreating those that he or she's supposed to be helping.
Caught on camera, a 4-year-old little girl assaulted by a teacher who was supposed to be caring for her.
2 former employees at a local daycare are facing charges after being accused of mistreating the child.
There's something stalking the Canadian workplace. It can be offensive, hurtful, and hazardous to your health. Still, 1 in 6 of us has felt it, the pain of being bullied at work. But as it's often psychological, this particular brand of abuse can be hard to recognize. It can also be hard to fight.
This is cell phone video shot by students during a class at Kopachuk Middle School last February. We got a copy from an attorney but agreed not to show the kids' faces. She is representing the 13-year-old boy on the floor, covered up by chairs.
It was a teacher-led bullying incident of epic proportions.
You see, they can't believe that anyone can be so evil. But we're not dealing with just the human persons. We are dealing with the spirits behind them. That's what I've been telling you. Who could have believed that Hitler could do the things that he did? They couldn't believe. We're talking man's inhumanity to man that's inspired by Satan. So I'm just letting you know the heartlessness. What goes into a mind? What makes someone to be so wicked, so evil, as to destroy so many people?
Undoubtedly, man's inhumanity to man has gone through different phases of evolvement, thereby making it conspicuous that the COVID narrative was another well-calculated plot to unleash the age-long wickedness that has been inherent in the hearts of certain individuals in our world. But God's people can be that oasis of love in a troubled world.
You better know the word of God now for yourself, because this is what's going to keep you afloat and beyond others, because the world in which we live today has a lot of wickedness, so much wickedness, deliberate destruction of lives. So when I share the word with you, it builds you. It makes you spiritually stalwart, rugged, and then you can face anything, because the word of God has been deposited in your system.
Fear them not, for I have delivered them into thine hand. There shall not a man of them stand before thee. Joshua 10 verse 8.